Okay, so you can see that I've already rolled out some slabs. So the reason why I did that is that we're working with stiff slab construction. They're not quite stiff, but they stiffen up a little bit because I just let them air out a little bit, laid them out on some newspaper. These tables really suck a lot of moisture up, so they work well for doing that. So roll out big slabs, and I know that Marissa already showed you how to use the slab roller when she showed you the nice slab cups. But I just want to reiterate a few things. So to roll out a big slab, I usually just take the whole block of clay out of the bag and cut it lengthwise. That way, I'm not making multiple teeny slabs. I'm getting pretty substantially sized. Oh, I'm going to use the slab roller.
Okay.
So yeah, I will. Do you want to help with that?
Yeah, I can.
Okay, so I'll just need to move it whenever I come back over here. Just demo like how to make a slab, which I know you already did, but.
I just wanted to make sure you weren't supposed to be recording yourself.
Yeah, we're recorded. Okay, so we're gonna run this through a few times. I would say keep your slabs between 1/2 inch to a quarter of an inch thick. You don't want them too thin, or else they're not going to stand up. You don't want them too thick, or else you're gonna end up with the heaviest piece ever. So again, don't run all of it through. Don't run a huge chunk through all at once. We're gonna whittle it down a little at a time. Still a little big. So thick. I'm being hasty. So I always flip it over as I'm rolling. I don't just keep it in the same spot. If you do that, that one spot in the canvas is going to become oversaturated and it's just going to stick to the canvas. So make sure you're flipping it around ever so often. Okay. So if it starts to get a little long, you can always flip it the other direction. All right, we're almost there. Make sure that when you roll your slabs out, you roll them out to a uniform thickness. Don't use like a 1/2 inch slab and then a 1/4 inch slab connected to that, because it won't dry evenly. All right, we're done. So you'll notice I have a whole bunch of slabs rolled out. That way I kind of set myself up for success. Again, I'm using Rodsbod because it stiffens up a lot faster. And if I were using B-Mix or Stony White, I wouldn't have been able to move that slab over here like that. It would have been a mess. Okay, so first what I'm gonna do, I've got my design already in my head. What I would suggest doing is if you have something that's really complicated that needs to be measured out a lot, be sure to like kind of write down your dimensions and stuff in your sketchbook. Have a plan before you go in. Thank you. So this is a really good process for people who plan a lot. This isn't a willy-nilly process, I guess you could say. All right, so I'm gonna start by cutting a straight edge here. And I always cut out my parts before I get started. So you're basically like creating your building materials before you're getting started on the piece, okay? Straight edge there. So I'm gonna recreate a piece I made probably 15 years ago in my very first beginning class. It was like a cylindrical center and then it had like triangular tunnels on the side. So we're gonna see if I can redo that. So this is gonna be my base. I'm gonna go ahead and cut that out. I always see students like starting and they like, sometimes will like make a bunch of really small slabs and like you just basically set yourself up for success, just like cutting everything out first and then working on everything. So, here. So if you're like me and you can't do geometry or math, you can always take a piece of paper or something and see how that's gonna fit around. I'm probably just gonna cut my slabs a little long, but so I'm going to be building like a tall tube, basically. I can do that in a few ways. I can use one large piece of slab, or I can build with a couple slabs up. I'm probably gonna go ahead and get a little brave and just use one large slab. So right now what I'm doing is I'm creating like a square edge. What I mean by square is a 45-degree angle. That way I don't have any issues. So I cut a straight edge here. I just basically butt my ruler up to the end. You guys all have rulers in your boxes. And then I'm just gonna cut another straight edge here. That way I have a 45-degree angle down at that bottom. And I can just cut like really nice, crisp, perfect strips, all right? Maybe I should cut this out of, how long is that? 14 inches. No, 14. I don't think that'll be long enough, so we're just gonna cut this off. I'm gonna set that aside though. That's usable scrap right there. I use this cup to cut my base, but you can cut your base in any shape you would like. It doesn't have to be round. Does anybody have a little slip jar I can borrow? Like your little jar with a slip in it? Is that okay? Is that kosher? I don't have any, so. All right, so before you make any attachments, I like to bevel my edges. Okay, thank you. So I like to bevel my edges. So this is a tool I bought online for about like $5. You don't have to buy it, but it does make your life a lot easier whenever you're cutting beveled edges. So you'll see like I have a 45-degree angle side and I have a 30 and a 60. So you don't have to always make 90-degree angles. You can make different angles and things like that. But to make my attachments, I usually bevel. That way we're not butting up one flat piece to a next. It creates kind of a joint and it hides your seams a lot. It makes things a lot easier and makes measuring a lot easier. You don't have to account for the thickness of the clay when you're measuring this way. Does that make sense? Okay. So if I was making a 4x4x4 box, I could just initially cut out 4 or 5 4x4 pieces, cut them with the bevel, and they'll fit together perfectly. If I did it in another way, I would have to make like one side. So say my slabs are 1/4 of an inch thick, I would have to make one side 3.5 inches and the other 4. So that's a lot of unnecessary math. With this, it cuts all that out for you. So I'm just going to take this, and it sits flat across the surface, and I'm going to pull it around that piece. Just like you guys did with your coil pots initially, I told you to bevel the edge a little bit so you can hide that initial connection. All right. Then I'm going to score. I really want to find out where Gemina has that big rake tool that she had that she was using for scoring. I was like, yes. It's even better than a fork. So I'm going to slip. Lane, I would suggest adding more clay to your slip. It's more water than slip. You want it to be like all like this. Yucky. Good stuff. Joanna also made me feel a little bit better about the fact that I just use my hands a lot instead of tools. So people always use paintbrushes and things, and I'm just like, I'm a mess. All right, so we've got that beveled. I'm going to bevel the bottom edge and the this edge of my the connecting edge of my slab right in front of me. All right, so I'm going to bevel here. You can bevel also by using like your knife at a 45-degree angle, but obviously that was much easier. You can get these on a website called clayking.com. They have some that are cheaper too. This is like a more expensive, longer lasting version, but they have plastic ones that are smaller. If you're handy in a wood shop, you can make one of these yourself. All it is wire screwed to the top of a piece of wood, cut at a 90-degree angle. Nothing terribly fancy. So before I attach this, I want to make sure so we're going to cut it. Right there. So this is if you're like me and you don't like properly measuring. If you're good at the math and measuring, you can do it the other way. Okay. Again, that's a good usable slab for later. Just I'm going to set it aside. Okay, so because I beveled this edge, I'm not going to bevel the front side, obviously, because that's going to be two angles going together. So I'm going to flip it over and bevel the other side over here, and then they'll sandwich together, just so, ideally. Score. I'm clumsy this morning, y'all. So when I was an undergrad, I built this with multiple pieces stacking on top of each other, and I'm like, use one big slab now. I made that much more complicated than it needed to be.
Did it take you a lot longer?
Yeah, like building this cylinder took me like a day. This took me like, 20 minutes maybe. Because the nice thing again about the Rodsbod clay is it stiffens up really nicely. You guys saw me rolling these slabs out just a minute ago. It didn't take me long. All right, there's a little on the long side, so we're gonna trim it.
So is that the clay that we should use for this?
I would suggest it. You might have some left over from the last project if you used it for the last project. Some of you probably need to buy a new bag at this point. So I would suggest using Rodsbod. It will cooperate a lot better. You won't struggle as much with it.
Is this clay $20 too? Or?
Yeah, they're all the same.
Oh.
All the same. Where my needle tool go? Okay. So see how this connection's going to butt together? Ooh yeah, that's good stuff. Overlaps, that way we're not like two connections like this, like that it has the opportunity to kind of split apart as it's drying, but when you're overlapping them like this, you're gonna have a lot like smaller chance of those things happening. And if I let this slab sit up a little bit longer, it wouldn't be so wiggly and it would look a lot nicer right off the bat. I don't think it's so bad yet. Okay, so I'm going to take my serrated rib and I'm going to smooth that out. You can also use your flat rib, whichever works for you. I just love my serrated rib. And if you want to reinforce your seams, add a coil. It's a little hard for me to get all the way down to the bottom here, but I'm gonna try. I think I've got it. So when you're wondering, well, what tool do I use to smooth out the coil on the bottom? Your finger. The ones you were born with. That's what I really like about Joanna's process too, is that like she really pared down her tools. I have too many tools, I'm reliant on tools, whereas she is not. So any slab I connect, I usually take a small coil and bead it in. It's like a welding bead. I think about like all of different building processes while I'm building things like this. So it's like just when you're, I mean, you guys probably have never welded either, but but when you weld, typically there's a bead of hot metal that's put in to connect those two things. That's why I kind of think about like this is a welding bead on this metal structure that I'm creating out of clay. And the cool thing is like, maybe that's something that you enjoy seeing like on architecture is that welding bead. So that's something you could exploit totally. Ooh, I might do that. No, I didn't do that. All right. Okay, again, red rubber rib's gonna be your best friend. smooth if you want smooth. If you don't want it smooth, you don't have to have it smooth. I will say, one of my biggest pet peeves is leaving the texture of the canvas when it's not on purpose and when it's just pure laziness and not taking it away. I've always had like students be like, but I like the texture of the canvas, and I'm like, okay, that's fine, but make it more purposeful. Don't make it look like you just forgot to smooth things out. So I can just flip this over and clean up the bottom real quick. So you can see where that seam meets. It's not really all that visible. It's just on that corner edge, so I can go back and smooth it out. And I think for this, I kind of want to make a hollow lid that kind of like is a conical shape. So I'll show you how to do that. And if you're ever questioning like your math skills or what these shapes are actually going to do, if you need to build a paper template, like out of regular printer paper, you can even choose to use like cardstock or something a little stiffer. You can build these things, pre-build them out of paper. So I know that you're like, well, that's going to take a long time. But really the important thing with slab building is the pre-planning. It's very different from most of the other processes we're using. Like the pre-planning, I don't pre-plan at all. But I had to once, so you have to once too. It's like, I keep thinking about the things Joanna and I have talked about in the last few days. And it's just important for you guys to learn all of the processes and all of the ways of making, so you know what is, what you like and what you don't like. You're never gonna know unless you try it. I didn't build solid until 3 years ago, when my mentor was like, hey, you're not gonna be able to make the work that you wanna make until you just finally do build solid. And fine. Huh?
What do you mean by
Building solid? So all of my work is built with solid hunks of clay. So I have a 400-pound head in my studio right now because it hasn't been hollowed out yet. So that might be something we'll talk a little bit more with the last project. But it's the most efficient way for me to work because I desire a lot of gesture and movement in my work. In coil building, I used to coil build everything, and that just doesn't work. It doesn't give me the freedom to add clay, take clay away, and be really gestural with it. So it becomes a lot more physical when you work solid, but the really painstakingly annoying part is having to hollow everything out. So the sculpting part is so much fun because you're just free. You don't have any clay rules holding you back, right? But then when you hollow, that's when all those rules come back into play and you have to pay attention to what you're doing. But we'll talk about that a little bit more with the last project. Last project will be a sculpture-based project, so no functional lab.
Will that be when will that be after Thanksgiving, right?
It'll be before. It'll be a small project because hollowing it's kind of a difficult thing to do properly. So it'll probably be a small 2-part hollow situation. And then you'll be writing a paper component. It'll be more of a research on an artist and then making a work that's inspired by that person. Yeah, I need to figure out exactly how many weeks we have left. A little over a month, so about 5 weeks, 6 weeks maybe. So that means we're halfway through the semester now, right now. All right, I'm gonna move on from that. It's a little lumpy, I don't love it, but I can fix it more once it's stiffened up a little bit. that was, I think with this project too, I learned what burnishing was. So burnishing, if you guys don't know what that means, it is using like the back of a spoon, or you can use your thumb in a plastic bag, anything that is like stiff and hard, to basically compress the clay particles together, and it creates like, you did it. You didn't know you did it. So like whenever your pot like ended up becoming shiny after you were like, pressing down or smoothing down the clay. So with that red rubber rib, you can eventually compress it so much that it becomes like a shiny surface. So that's basically meaning, I always relate it to this. I don't know if you guys have ever watched Mythbusters before. Okay, so there's an episode where they actually found out you can polish turds, right? So they try different kinds of turds and they find out, you're like, oh my God. But it's the same way. It's like you're just compressing. So it's polishing the clay, same consistency and everything. So we're just gonna continue to do that. So that's always an option if you want a shiny surface or a nice like tight clean surface. Burnishing is the way to go. You can use like the back of a spoon or anything to do that, to achieve that. All right. So I've got like my initial form done. I'm gonna start working on a lid. I'm gonna add some like little open areas on the side, like little container areas on the side that you can put things on the end, and then this will be the jar portion.
This has to have a lid, right?
Do what?
This one has to have a lid of some kind?
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, it can be like the smallest lid on the side or something, just anything to like make it a lidded vessel in some way. Normally I just ask you guys to make like a piece regardless of whether it's a vessel or not, but I don't know why this time I decided to add the vessel component. COVID made me change everything, and it's going well so far, so it's good. You guys are killing it on your coil pots, by the way, and you're head of the other class.
When is our coil box due?
Technically they were due this week, but just like the building, you don't have to have it glazed and everything this week. Just built and everything by this week, and then we'll glaze and things as things get fired.
Should they be like trimmed and everything by this week?
You don't have like, so trimming like on the wheel, you don't have to do that to your pots. Like,
no, I meant, sorry.
Oh,
I meant,
cleaned
like,
up.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah, like just cleaned up. As long as they're ready by next week, I'm fine. You guys are, like I said, ahead of the other class, so I'm not too worried. Alright, so I'm gonna cut out, it's gonna be the bottom of my lid. I'm gonna create a hollow form for my lid. Right now what I'm doing is like marking the inside, because I want to make sure I put a flange on this portion, so when I pick this up it doesn't go flying off of it and break, because that's what will happen. If you put a pot without a flange, or like a lid without a flange on it, and you put it on that shelf, someone goes to pick it up, put it in a kiln, it's just gonna fly right off. So just make it to where that will not happen. All right. I almost did that to somebody's pot the other day, because it was like they had like this little baby flange that barely held on anything, and I was like, ah. Okay. Use this slab to make the top. Oh, maybe, yeah, that'd be enough. Everybody kind of getting how this is gonna work? Yeah. I'm trying to take more time to demo. I used to go really quickly because I thought I was boring everyone to tears, but you're just gonna have to be bored. Sorry. Okay. I don't know how tall I want this to be. Let's say. So I want to think about like proportion to my pot here. So my pot's about 8.5 inches tall. Let's go with a lid that's 3.5 inches tall. We'll see what that looks like. I can always change it if I don't like it. I'm not stuck to it. Your eyes are playing tricks on me this morning. Nothing's looking straight. Oops. So again, I'm beveling my edges before I connect anything. Oops. Notice that I took that off so I could use the banding wheel because this makes it so much easier to bevel something that's round. Got it right in front of the camera though, so that makes it useless. So I'm gonna kind of play a little bit and see how I want this to work. Actually, what I should have done is done a 30-60 slab. So that would, yeah, this is the there we go. This might need a little clearer.
So if you use a 30-60 one, it's more like a cone or something?
Yeah, so it creates a steeper angle. But I'm gonna have to do what we call what we call darting to really get it to be cone shaped because now it's just wanting to lean to one side. So I'm going to take a little slice here and I'm gonna cut a triangle shape. Oops, I realize you guys can't see what I'm doing when I have it towards me. And that is going to kind of tuck it in. I know it doesn't look pretty, but it will eventually.
For darting, do you have to be like super specific?
No.
With like measuring and stuff? Okay.
No, yeah, you can tell I was not.
Well, I
Yeah.
just meant like.
Yeah, no, you don't have to be. You can be, but you don't have to be.
Like sewing, you have to be kind of
Exactly.
accurate. So
It's
like-
exactly like, I mean, yeah, like when it's funny because like not a lot of people say what I'm like, oh, like sewing, it's darting, just like that. It's the same process. You're bringing it, tucking it in.
But on the darting, do you slip and score, or so you're not doing
No,
that?
the clay is like the same consistency. I'm not going to worry too much about it. If I were drawing like, if I were connecting two sort of dry pieces, I would definitely add slip or add slip. But right now I'm more like measuring what I need to do. A little if you were more inclined with math, you would cut out the like smiley face piece, but I'm not. So I have to like, will this fit? I tried it like in front of students, and I'm like, I just look like an idiot trying to do the math, so I'm just gonna see if it fits. My mind is just not made that way. That's okay though. But you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna see this nasty messed up piece, and I'm going to make a nice crisp one. It's like a template basically with clay. I'm just problem solving in front of you guys. Oh, that looks so much nicer.
So in the 30 and 60, is it, they're just always opposite, it doesn't matter which one is
Yeah, so like because of this the length of this angle, it's like one side's 30, one side's 60. Cut a little bit more off of this. And if you're curious too about this whole process, you should talk to Marissa as well. So she can like repeat forms and forms and different things like that. She creates patterns out of tar paper, which is like they use it to roof houses. Do you guys know what I'm talking about when I say tar paper? It's like it's kind of stinky, real thick. But it's really nice to make your templates out of that because they last a long time. And they don't like curl up when they get wet. They're pretty like water resistant. They're really nice to use. You can write on them like specifically what they're like a template for. So like if you start making slab pots or something like that, and you want to make multiples of the same size, cut yourself a template, and then you won't have a bunch of varying sized and shaped cups. Perfect, but it'll work. So, I'm making this hollow, so what does that mean? What do I need to do to make sure it doesn't explode in the kiln?
Poke it.
Yep, poke a hole in it. Because I'm going to put a top on this. It's not going to look really weird. No, looks like a bullet. How fitting.
So if you lived, like, let's say you left that big hole at the top,
Mhm.
you have to poke a hole.
No, that is an opening for air to escape. So basically what we're trying to avoid is air and moisture getting trapped inside. If it doesn't have a place to escape, what it's going to do is it's going to make a place to escape. It's going to explode. So we want to make sure that we absolutely poke holes in things. You can fire things slow and avoid that. We do fire things really slow, but not that slow. Like you have to like really baby it for it to not have any issues. So also, when on your slab built vessels, just make sure that like you let them dry really slow, because those connection points between your slabs are going to be where cracks are going to want to form. So just make sure that you are really cognizant of how fast you're letting it dry. So once you're finished, don't just put it right back on the shelf. You want to keep it covered for a little bit, so it has a chance to dry out just a little bit, very slowly. Luckily with this clay, if you're using Rad's Bod, it doesn't crack quite as much because it had a lot of grog in it. Grog is like ground down, already fired clay particles, like ground down into like a sand and then put into clay. So it allows it to stand up a little bit more. Allows a lot more airflow inside the clay and allows it to dry faster. So like when Joanna was talking about how she uses different clay bodies for different things, that's what we're talking about. So I'm always like, try this clay for this, try this clay for that. Different clays work for different things. I use a really groggy clay body for my large scale work. I use a not so groggy clay body for like smaller, about that size work. And then for my functional work, I use porcelain that has no grog and nothing. And it cracks like hell if I'm not like real careful with it. Cut the top off of this. Pretty good. Proud of myself. I'm just tracing things. I think over the summer, because of COVID, I've just embraced like the messy person that I am. Like I haven't been able to change for 35 years. What makes me think I can do it now? So this is like a version of a piece I made 15 years ago in my beginning class. So it's a jar. So this lid is going to go on top, and then I'm going to create like triangular shapes on the sides that work as like small containers of their own. So I'll just show you a quick drawing of what I came up with 15 years ago for this project. So left-handed and he ruins all the markers. They're all shoved into the marker. Okay. So the first one I made didn't have, or the original didn't have a lid. So it was like that on top. Terrible drawing. So that's the cylinder, and then it had these sort of like triangular container shapes off the sides. That look like that, and they vary in heights.
What was your inspiration for it?
I loved like industrial, like so it was like really straight and very perfect, and then it had like rivets like all down the side, like it was like welded and riveted together. It had rivets like on corners and edges. I wish I had pictures of it. I don't know if I do. Maybe somewhere deep in the archives. And then it had, so it kind of looked like that. So it was like smaller containers on the sides and then that middle container. So it's almost like a silo, kind of like I grew up in farmland, so that's basically where I was like seeing things going. Like old broken down silos, old farming equipment that's just left out in the middle of nowhere, that kind of stuff. Needle tool. It's funny because I use a lot of projects that I had when I was an undergrad, but I've just kind of changed them a little bit. It's kind of like this idea of like, I liked it, so you will too. If I didn't like it, I did not give it to you as assignment. I'm not beveling my edges here. I'm just gonna go ahead and pop it on top. It's not really super important right now. The nice thing is like the sharp edge, or you can just use your straight rib, but it cleans up those edges really nicely. Should be pretty smart about this. So, like I said, like you're crisping up that edge, and then I can just drag the flat edge of my rib and kind of clean up any of those extra boogery things and make a really nice, clean, sharp edge. And again, once it stiffens up a little bit more, I can really clean up those edges. So the nice thing is that because my slabs are all the same thickness, I can kind of see where that connection, where that slab is, so I know how thick this is. So I know where to put my flange. So I'm just gonna put that just on the inside. Ha ha ha. This girl cannot draw a straight line for the life of her, so that's why I work with figures. They're not straight at all. Okay, I'm just gonna cut a little strip of slab. Doesn't have to be really long, just long enough to hold the lid on. Ooh, my slabs are getting really good and stiff. This is about where you want it to be. If you want to build like a perfect little box, this is the stiffness you want it to be. You guys can come feel this too and get an idea of what it feels like. And this slab, if you guys like want to fight over it, you can have it, because I'm probably not gonna, well, never mind. I think I'm gonna finish this thing today, so I'm gonna use it. I want to finish something finally. I've made all these demos and I haven't finished a damn thing. They're just like all half finished over there. So the nice thing is I can probably just make this the width of the ruler. So I'm just going to cut on the other side of the ruler. Measure up where that needs to go. Actually, I'll make it a little smaller, but it looks kind of ridiculous now that I look at it.
It's not going anywhere.
No, it's not. That will not come off. It does not fly off.
I just want to make like a rounded top.
Mhm.
Whenever I made mine for the, because I didn't know what I was doing, I
Yeah.
just kind of like shaped it and then tried to let it set.
So I will show you. Let me go grab something and I'll show you something you can use to make a rounded lid. So we have a whole bunch of these cluster molds just around the corner. We call these slump molds. I'll show you how you can use it in just a sec.
Can't you do that with like plates and stuff? Or
Yeah, you
bowls,
can
like,
make plates,
just-
bowls, lids, anything that's round, you can use that. You just drape your slab over it. Let it sit up a little bit, and it's done.
Man, I wish I.
I let you learn the hard way. Yeah. Yeah, if you asked, I probably would have been like, oh yeah, we've got this thing. It's okay. That's why I say, like, ask questions. I try not to be a scary person to ask questions. So, because I was that kid in undergrad that never asked questions because I was scared to death of all of my professors. And I really, really try not to be that professor. My undergraduate professor was terrifying. She was the scariest woman. But I loved her. Like, in the end, like, she kind of like took me under her wing. But I laid low for a really long time and just kept my head down and worked, because if you weren't working, she'd tear your face off. We'd always get like group like lectures on like how we're not spending enough time in the studio. And I'd be sitting there like, I am. And then she would finally like call me out and like, Jamie's spending time here. And I'm like, thank you, you noticed. But I realized like later in life I had to get a little bit more brave. I mean, I was like 20, 21. I was scared shitless. Alright. Not beautiful, but I'll have an opportunity to clean it up a little bit more a little later. I don't want to add a coil to the outside because I don't want that to get in the way of like it fitting inside of the other form. So I'm just going to do the coil on the inside. It fits before I keep. It's a little loose. It's not exactly what I want, but it'll stay in there. Push it out a little bit more. That'll work. So, like in the assignment says, I am asking you guys to make like a crazy ass knob. You don't have to like make something terribly crazy, but I just want something so like it's obvious that it's where you pick the lid off of. Does that make sense? So like if your lid is something that's kind of just tucked inside and just a flat thing, make something that looks like a knob so you can obviously like, oh, that's how this is intended to be used. Okay. Any questions on anything? Oh, I didn't show you how to use that. So, one of my favorite things to do in making a perfect like little round form is to just take a slab, cut some of that off here. I'm gonna use this big one. I wanna make it big. We have bigger molds if you need to make a bigger lid. The nice thing is I can just press that down around the mold. The clay will start to conform to it.
So at this point, if you had cracking or something, would you
Just take your rib,
okay.
say bye-bye. Rubber rib works well too. So I'm going to cut off all this extra stuff. I know it's not pretty right now, it will be in a minute. So you can do this on the throwing wheel as well, but these banding wheels work really well. So you may not have to even bother with that. I'm just gonna make sure that like my plaster mold is centered. The nice thing about like these banding wheels is you have like these centrifugal rings, so you can see where you're at. About center here. Okay, that's good. I'm gonna take my needle tool if I can find it. And I'm just going to hold it steady in one place, hold my needle tool steady in one place. Beautiful. Look, I have a bowl now. You can even like simply draw, like if you were wanting to make a bowl like this, flip and score, add a foot, you have a bowl. It's very fast, very easy. Much easier than throwing a bowl. All right, so let that stiffen up a little bit before you take it off so it'll hold its shape, and then you have that form. Okay? Cool, so those are some options. There are plenty more molds back there, so if you wanna try those out, you're welcome to. But yeah, so if you have your sketches done, I'm gonna talk to a few of you about your sketches that I've seen online. But go ahead and get those sent in as soon as possible so I can kind of talk to you about what you're gonna do, okay? All right, cool. Go for it. Like he's working away on this thing. It looks like a Stanley thermos now. You guys know what that is?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The coffee one.
Yeah, I'm like, I just made a real life Stanley thermos.
Ultimate camping.
Yeah. It's like my husband's like go to work coffee thermos. He's an old man. Oh, also, I'm not sure if any of you are planning to apply for BFA, but those applications are due on the 21st online. There was an email sent out to everybody yesterday about it. Is anybody in here planning to apply for BFA this semester? Anybody?
When do you have to do it? It's before
So,
you.
so you have to have a certain amount of classes before you can. So you have to have all four classes and the beginning level of each like medium. Does that make sense? So it's like beginning for mixing, sculpture, all that stuff. And then you can apply.
Do we, so for this, should I just, like, loosely put the bag over it?
Yeah.
And just kind of?
Yeah, you can like lightly turn it.
Okay.
And let a little air get to it, but don't let it dry. All the way
Right,
around.
that's my thing, is like, it's already feeling,
Just dipping that now.
yeah,
Yeah, perfect.
even just from,
Yeah.
okay, so.
Looks good.
You're still recording, by the way.
Oh, thank you. Evie, it's just